The King is said to be extremely unhappy with Keir Starmer for handing Donald Trump an invitation to Balmoral so publicly, as it conflicted with his aim to protect Canada from Trump's threats.
Bit of breaking news from Buckingham. Either Keir Starmer has misunderstood the nature of that invitation,
I think
he cares so little about what King Charles thinks that he used it to his advantage and leveraged that relationship with it.
It's the latter.
A Palace aide told the Times the idea was the way. Fast forward to the last couple of minutes, and the Palace has confirmed to me that the official invitation was handed over to the White House last week. And as you said, that statement from a Palace spokesperson says His Majesty has known President Trump for many years and looks forward to hosting.
Britain is cracking at the seams. In a move that's rattled the Palace and stunned Westminster, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has launched a direct challenge to royal tradition, triggering a storm that's now spiralling far beyond politics. What began as quiet tension between Downing Street and the Crown has exploded into a full-blown constitutional standoff. Starmer's decision didn't just bend the rules, it bulldozed through centuries of precedent. And the backlash is only beginning.
White House. Right. My sources tell me Buckingham Palace not happy with Sir Keir Starmer, that he handed over that letter to the King in front of, to the President even in front of the cameras. That was meant to be a private visit, inviting him in the summer to Balmoral for the King to discuss a state visit later on in President Trump's terms. Now, from my understanding, the King, it was reported in the Times this morning, but from my understanding, the King was a little bit cautious about inviting Trump so soon for a state visit, given what he'd said about Canada wanting to become the 51st state of the United States of America. And of course, that puts the King in a constitutionally problematic situation because he is King of Canada and the United Kingdom. But of course, he has to act on the advice of the United Kingdom anyway.
But here's the twist. While Labour grapples with the fallout, Reform UK is charging forward like a battering ram. Once dismissed as fringe, the party has found its moment, and it's seizing it with both hands. Fuelled by public anger and a sense of betrayal, Reform is surging in the polls, reshaping the electoral map before our eyes. This is no ordinary power struggle. It's a clash of institutions, values, and national identity. And as Parliament, the Palace and the people pull in opposite directions, Britain is entering a political crisis with no clear end in sight. At the centre of this storm is a quiet but radical shift. In recent weeks, Starmer has taken steps to minimise the monarchy's involvement in approving major legislation, a role that, while largely ceremonial, has always been treated with caution and respect. Now, that unwritten rule has been thrown aside.
This September.
The most surprising bit of that story, Cameron, is the fact that King Charles did not give Keir Starmer permission to hand over that obsequious kind of that invitation on the global stage in the White House.
Yes.
So King Charles was sat at home watching that and went, hang on a minute.
No one told me.
No, you weren't supposed to do that in public. That was a private gesture. So either Keir Starmer has misunderstood the nature of that invitation,
I think
he cares so little about what King Charles thinks that he used it to his advantage and leveraged that relationship with it.
It's the latter.
A Palace aide told the Times the idea was...
The Prime Minister is reportedly fast-tracking bills on constitutional reform and sweeping changes to the House of Lords without seeking the usual royal consent. Legally, he's within his rights. Politically, it's a grenade tossed into one of Britain's oldest institutions. For generations, royal assent has been more than tradition. It's been a symbol of continuity, a reassuring gesture that no matter how chaotic politics became, the Crown stood above it. Starmer's approach has shattered that illusion. To some, it looks like modernisation. To others, it feels like a slow-motion coup. Inside Labour circles, the move is being defended as long overdue reform. But outside those walls, alarm bells are ringing. Critics see it as an aggressive power grab, and royalists fear it's part of a broader campaign to strip the monarchy of what little influence it still holds. Either way, the message is clear. This Prime Minister is rewriting the rules. And he isn't asking for permission. The backlash has been swift and fierce. Within hours of Starmer's manoeuvre hitting headlines, the political atmosphere turned electric. Critics across the spectrum began painting him as authoritarian, even reckless, for dismantling protocols that have quietly held Britain's system together for decades.
Sir Keir Starmer, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty.
You must be utterly exhausted and nearly on your knees. Not much. Quite a break. Yes. Anyway, you're here.
Yes. It's a very sort of quick changeover as well.
To say the least. And having to get to grips with everything straight away must be quite exhausting.
And as outrage simmers in royalist circles, Reform UK is turning that anger into momentum. Once laughed off as a populist sideshow, the party is now laser-focused on one message. Starmer is threatening British tradition, and only reform will stop him. Nigel Farage, never one to miss an opportunity, has stepped into the spotlight with renewed purpose. His message is tapping into a powerful mix of patriotism, nostalgia, and frustration. For voters who feel that everything familiar is being swept away, whether it's over borders, culture, or now the monarchy, Reform UK is becoming their political refuge. Polls are beginning to reflect this. Constituencies once considered Conservative safe zones are flipping. Even Labour's heartlands in the Midlands and the North are starting to look shaky. And behind every percentage point gained by Reform is a story of working-class discontent, disillusionment with elites, and the fear that something sacred is being lost. Reform UK isn't wasting time. They've launched a nationwide campaign to force Parliament into debating the monarchy's future role. Volunteers are hitting the streets, gathering signatures and rallying supporters under a single banner: defend British heritage before it disappears. The energy is undeniable. Farage's speeches are flooding social media, clips racking up millions of views within hours. Outside Parliament and even at the gates of Buckingham Palace, protesters are waving flags, demanding action and chanting slogans that haven't been heard in decades. And it's not just the public reacting. Inside Westminster, the ground is shifting. Conservative MPs, who once dismissed reform as a sideshow, are now warning of its growing influence. Some are even jumping ship, defecting to join the movement outright. Labour backbenchers, meanwhile, are growing restless, privately voicing concern about the pace and direction of Starmer's leadership. Even the Liberal Democrats, long seen as a stabilising middle ground, are beginning to show signs of unease. Their leadership is reportedly alarmed by Starmer's top-down approach, worried it could spark a broader constitutional crisis. In this climate, political loyalty is no longer guaranteed, and as the old guard scrambles to contain the fallout, a new force is rewriting the rules. One rally, one headline, one viral clip at a time. Inside Buckingham Palace, the silence is deafening. As tradition dictates, the king has remained publicly neutral, but behind closed doors, it's a different story. Royal aides are reportedly scrambling, caught off guard by Starmer's decision and uncertain how to respond without triggering further political upheaval. Insiders say Charles is privately unsettled. There's talk of a discreet meeting between the King and the Prime Minister, not as a confrontation, but as a quiet attempt to restore balance. Even a symbolic gesture of that kind would speak volumes. It would mark the monarchy's first meaningful pushback in years. But the risks are enormous. If the king intervenes too forcefully, he could be accused of overstepping his role. If he stays silent, critics will say he's surrendering centuries of custom. It's a constitutional trap with no clear exit. And Starmer, allies say he's unmoved, focused, determined to modernise what he sees as outdated relics of the past. But even within his own party, that determination is beginning to feel more like stubbornness. As calls grow louder for transparency and restraint, his refusal to slow down is creating tension not just with political opponents, but with members of his own team. The monarchy, once untouchable, is now caught in the crossfire. Across Britain, the mood is shifting. In towns once painted red on every electoral map, Labour's grip is weakening. Conversations in pubs, markets and working-class neighbourhoods reveal the same frustration. Voters feel ignored, traditions are under threat, and Starmer's government seems miles away from the concerns of everyday people. This is exactly where Reform UK is gaining ground. Their message is blunt, emotional and resonant. Restore pride, protect British values, and push back against a political elite that seems more interested in rewriting the country than representing it. What's striking is how quickly this sentiment is spreading. In communities that once saw Farage as a protest vote at best, reform is now being seen as a legitimate alternative. They're not just picking up support from disaffected Tories, but from lifelong Labour voters who feel abandoned. And the timing couldn't be worse for Starmer. Every time his administration moves to overhaul a traditional institution without broad consultation, it plays straight into reformers' hands. They don't need to exaggerate. All they have to do is point to headlines, stir patriotic emotion, and present themselves as the defenders of the old Britain many still cherish. Meanwhile, Starmer continues to project calm. In press briefings, he insists the monarchy is still respected and that reforms are aimed at strengthening, not undermining, British democracy. But the messaging is falling flat. The more he downplays the crisis, the more disconnected he appears from the storm he's unleashed. Commentators from across the political spectrum are warning that this strategy could backfire spectacularly. It's not just about legislative changes, it's about perception. To millions of Britons, it now looks like their Prime Minister is dismissing tradition, centralising power, and brushing off centuries of national identity like outdated paperwork. And history shows how quickly these moments can spiral. If Starmer is seen as arrogant or out of touch, especially with symbolic institutions like the Crown, it could trigger a political realignment Britain hasn't witnessed since the Thatcher era. The country may be drifting towards something far deeper than a party shake-up. It's a battle over who speaks for Britain and what kind of future the nation wants. Starmer may think he's reshaping government for the better, but in doing so, he's opened the door for his rivals to reshape the country in ways he never intended. The shockwaves aren't stopping at Britain's borders. Around the world, foreign media are picking up the story, framing it as a potential constitutional crisis. Questions are now surfacing in international circles. Is the UK abandoning its traditions? Is this the early sign of a shift toward republicanism? In places like Australia and Canada, where debates over the monarchy have long simmered, this moment is being watched closely. Political analysts abroad are drawing comparisons, noting how quickly public sentiment can swing when royal institutions appear vulnerable. The image of Britain as a symbol of steady, ceremonial power is beginning to crack. And it's not just diplomats watching, investors are paying attention too. Markets thrive on predictability, and anything that threatens the perception of stability, even symbolic stability, can create ripples. Financial insiders are already cautioning that if this drama escalates, it could spook international confidence and create real-world economic consequences. Back at home, Starmer's own party is showing signs of stress. Senior figures from Labour's old guard are beginning to voice concern, warning that alienating the monarchy could cost the party its connection to moderate and older voters. Behind the scenes, whispers of internal dissent are growing louder. If Starmer hoped this would be a clean break from the past, it's starting to look more like a fracture line, running straight through the foundations of his leadership. That fracture is now spreading through Parliament. On the surface, Labour still appears united, but behind closed doors, loyalty is fraying. A growing number of MPs are questioning the wisdom of pushing reforms that risk a showdown with one of Britain's most beloved institutions. Some are calling for caution. Others are quietly preparing to challenge Starmer's grip on the party. If those murmurs turn into full-blown revolt, the Prime Minister could soon find himself surrounded, not just by opposition on the right, but by resistance from within. By contrast, Reform UK is moving with clarity and confidence. Their platform is simple: cut through the chaos, clean up the system, and restore national pride. And for many voters, that clarity is refreshing. Farage's decision to run in the next general election has only added fuel to the fire. He's not just trying to win a seat, he's building a movement. One that could send dozens of Reform MPs to Parliament. And if that happens, everything changes. Power sharing, coalition deals, blocked legislation. It would be a parliament forced to reckon with a new populist bloc ready to challenge both Labour and the Conservatives from the outside. What started as a symbolic act by Starmer may now be opening the door to a political transformation on a scale Britain hasn't seen in generations. This isn't theatre anymore. It's a struggle over identity, history, and the future of British democracy. Every speech, every leaked memo, every headline is feeding a national moment that feels more volatile by the day. Starmer may have intended to modernise, to streamline outdated traditions, but instead, he's triggered something far more unpredictable. Now, Britain finds itself at a crossroads. One path leads toward a stripped-down, government-first system that redefines the monarchy's place in national life. The other could see a fierce public backlash, a rise in populist power, and a reassertion of traditional values by force of voter will. In living rooms and town halls, people are no longer just watching politics. They're feeling it. They're picking sides, and the growing divide between Westminster's priorities and the public's instincts could reshape the country for decades. Reform UK is no longer a footnote, it's a movement gaining muscle. And while Starmer digs in, trying to hold the centre, Farage is charging from the edge, claiming ground, capturing attention and turning political fury into votes. The monarchy, the government and the electorate are all locked into a three-way standoff. One move in the wrong direction and Britain could find itself rewriting not just policy, but its entire political identity. Thanks for watching. If you want to stay ahead of the chaos and understand the bigger picture as it unfolds, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This is far from over, and what happens next will shape the UK for years to come.